Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Um, welcome to the webinar. Thank you for joining us today. Um, so welcome to the webinar, New Grants to Support Breakfast After the Bell, where we will discuss resources that are available to support school breakfast. Let me make sure my slides are advancing here. All right, so my name is Anna Colby, and here are today's panelists. So I want to start with, so I'm a nutrition policy advocate with the California Food Policy Advocates. And I want to start with giving a big thank you to Tara Mass and Zetta Reicker for joining us today and for taking the time out of their afternoon to share their expertise with us. Tara is staffing the school breakfast grant process, so she is a fantastic resource and has all the details you could want. So we're just so thrilled that she is on the line today. And Zetta has a ton of on-the-ground expertise and experience on how to make breakfast after the bell work. And Oakland has received a breakfast, and so she'll be speaking about Oakland Unified. She is a consultant for Oakland Unified School District, and she has a ton of on-the-ground experience. And Oakland received a breakfast grant last year and may have prior as well, so she can speak about how to create a fantastic breakfast after the bell program, as well as her experience with this grant process in particular. And I forgot to mention that Tara, I'm sure she'll introduce herself as well, but she is a school nutrition program specialist with the Nutrition Services Division at the California Department of Education. So to get us started today, we will start with webinar logistics, so you know what you're looking at here and how to interact with the webinar. I will provide a brief introduction to Breakfast After the Bell and these new breakfast grants, and then Tara will dive into the grant details, tips on successful applications, and highlight any key dates to keep in mind. As I mentioned, this is a great opportunity to have your questions answered about the grant. Then Zetta will dive into the ins and outs for operating a Breakfast After the Bell program, including best practices and challenges and how to overcome them. And then we will close today with questions and answers, where we hope to hear from all of you. So as you may have noticed, everyone is muted, not because we don't want to hear from you. In fact, we're hoping that you will chime in by asking questions in the questions panel. So please don't hold back. We have a staff member here that is monitoring the questions panel. So, ask questions anytime. If they're content questions, you can ask them throughout the presentation, and we'll get to those in the question and answer. But if you're having any problems, any problems with technology, any problems connecting or hearing or anything today, feel free to just, ask them in the questions panel, and we'll try to get to those right away. We are recording this webinar, and the slides will be available, the slides and the recording will be available online. So we will send you an email afterwards, so you know where to find those. Any questions that are not answered today will be answered in a follow-up email. So to start, a brief introduction about myself. As I mentioned, my name is Anna Colby. I'm with the California Food Policy Advocates. So the California Food Policy Advocates is a statewide policy and advocacy organization dedicated to improving the health and well-being of low-income Californians by increasing their access to nutritious, affordable foods. So we have been around for 25 years now. We actually just celebrated our 25-year anniversary a few months ago, and we have worked for decades to increase reach of the school breakfast program. So we are, super excited about these grants, which are well, I'll get into at least some of the overview of those grants in a moment. If and one of the reasons is that if you take a look at California public schools, 3 in 5 or more than 3 million of our California public school students are eligible for free or reduced price school meals. So there is great need in California, and these students, many of them face hunger or poor health or poor academic outcomes, and school meals are really one of the fabulous resources that can support children and help to ensure that they have what they need to succeed. Although we do have a substantial school breakfast gap, so 2 million of our low-income public school students in California miss out on the health, attendance, and academic benefits, and many more, the many benefits of school breakfast. It is solvable, but it is a large and persistent gap. So, I do want to commend all the folks on this call today for taking steps to address this gap. It really is people like you that are dedicated to supporting your students that make such a difference in the lives of your students and of these children. So thank you for all that you do and for being on the line today to learn more about the resources that are available to help you. Because, while this is a pressing and a real challenge, it is also an opportunity. And we know that you need the resources to help you to do that. So school breakfast grants can help fill that gap and provide you with the resources that you need. So I'm sure I don't need to tell, you on the line today about the benefits of school breakfast. I'm probably preaching to the choir a little bit here. But I did want to highlight some of the benefits to school breakfast beyond filling tummies, beyond addressing hunger. Of course, all these many things are related. But, thinking that this information can be helpful to get out to the school community. And we all know that our lives and having, at least from what I've heard from talking to folks, like our presenters and people on the line today, that school breakfast programs are stronger with community support and with collaboration. So sometimes we need to be able to talk beyond addressing hunger and mention the many other benefits of school breakfast as well. So research has supported and found that there are benefits to school breakfast in terms of improved cognitive function, improved academic achievement, improved diet and physical health, as well as emotional health and many others. I also want to highlight that research has found a connection between our school breakfast programs and improved attendance. So research has found that eating school breakfast increases student attendance by an average of 1.5 days of school per year. So if all low-income students were reached by school breakfast, we could see an increase. We could see improved attendance for 3 and 5 low-income children, 3 million fewer absences, that 1.5 days of attendance per student really adds up, and millions of additional district funding. So, I provide some of this information in case this is helpful for you all on the line when making the case to your school and your district leadership and others within your school community. And these research highlights can be found on our website at cfpa.net. So with that, I want to provide a brief overview of the service models with After the Bell Breakfast. Zetta is going to get into all of the details on this, so I will be brief. The After the Bell breakfast models. First of all, I'll start off by saying many schools have found that changing when breakfast is offered, by making that change, you can increase access to these incredible meals, and children and schools really reap the benefits. So to ensure that breakfast is served when and where children are available to eat really can have a large impact on attendance. So With that in mind, I'll say that these models that I'm about to talk a little bit about can all be operated under the school breakfast program. So this is really a way to tweak that program to meet your students' needs, and that all can be tailored. Nothing that I'm about to say is really set in stone or set in stone at all. So the second chance breakfast, which is a very popular option, is essentially serving students in the mid-morning after school has started. So in secondary schools, this could be in a passing period, and in elementary schools, this could be during recess. The grab-and-go breakfast is often breakfast served on mobile carts in high-traffic areas. It's a way to provide portable and quick and easy to grab breakfast to students that they can grab on the way to class or recess. And this really brings breakfast to where kids are, not necessarily making kids come to the cafeteria to get breakfast. Finally, breakfast in the classroom. This is typically, but not exclusively, in elementary schools. Breakfast is provided within the first 10 minutes, so you can eat, clean up, and get the day started. Teachers have found a lot of creative ways to pair the meal service with academic or administrative activities. So they could pair breakfast with taking attendance, with doing a homework check, or silent reading time. So as I mentioned, these really are concepts, but can be tailored to meet the specific needs of your school and children. And Zetta will really talk about the details and how this has worked for Oakland, how some of these models have worked for Oakland Unified. So just briefly, a little bit of background. The state legislature has recognized the value of our school breakfast programs, and $1 million has been available for startup and expansion of school breakfast now for these grant programs for several years now, and have helped launch and expand school breakfast across the state. Our organization, the California Food Policy Advocates, 2 years ago worked with many partner organizations to increase the funding for after the bell breakfast. And so the original grants were that still exist today, were for starting up and expanding school breakfast, and now there's this additional $2 million in grant funding that is geared towards after the bell breakfast models. So some of the models I just spoke about. So this budget investment is a good sign that our legislature understands how critical these resources are for California kids. And Tara will really dive into the details of the grants and the grant process. So with that, I will shortly turn it over to Tara here. I just wanted to share some resources from the California Food Policy Advocates. We have a number of school breakfast materials on our website. So we have a number of case studies of other districts that have really been successful with after the bell breakfast models. We have some fact sheets and that research overview that I mentioned earlier. One in particular is a newer policy brief that looks at the connections between attendance and breakfast and school breakfast. And then we also have a number of resources on the local control funding formula and the local control accountability plan and school nutrition, including school breakfast. So these are really resources to advocate for school nutrition to be included within your district funding plan. So that is another opportunity to get funding and support for your school breakfast programs. One final resource that I wanted to mention is that there are other grant funds available in addition to the ones we're talking about today. One in particular is with the California Action for Healthy Kids breakfast grants. The grant period will go live in early February, and I believe Action for Healthy Kids is having a webinar on February 20th. These grant funds can complement the state grants that we're going to be discussing here shortly. I believe actually Oakland did that, so maybe Zetta can share some experience on that. So I've included a website there and the name and email for the coordinator, Katia. So she, if you have any questions about those, she would be a great person to contact. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Tara. see here. All right. Tara, I believe you have control, and I've made the presentation full presentation mode, so you'll actually click to advance your slides.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tara Mass, and I am a school nutrition program specialist in the Nutrition Services Division at the California Department of Education, and I administer the breakfast grants. So first, I wanted to thank CFPA for including me on today's webinar. I'm really excited to share some of the information with you on this next round of grants. So let's start off by going over which types of agencies are eligible for these grants. Public school districts, county offices of education, and directly funded charter schools are the only types of agencies that are eligible for these grants. Also, SFAs must have at least 20% of students enrolled at the site approved for free and reduced price meals. And that additional pot of funding that Anna was talking about will be prioritized for sites with over 60% of students enrolled approved for free and reduced price meals and are implementing or expanding a breakfast after the bell service model. And each SFA may apply for no more than 10 sites for up to $15,000 per site. All right, really quickly, I wanted to go over our grant timeline. The request for applications was posted to the CDE's funding webpage on January 8th, so if you belong to our email list, you should have received a notification. Applications are due to the CDE on March 1st, and we will select our grantees in June, and funding should go out in July. And the grant period runs from July 1st, 2018 to March 1st, 2019. If that seems tight, we offer extensions on a case-by-case basis, so we may be able to extend that beyond March 1st. Progress reports will be due in November, and final invoices are due to the CDE March 1st, 2019. A quick note, if your SFA is awarded a grant, make sure that you purchase your items within that grant period. If items are purchased outside, like before July 1st, you'll have to return those funds. Next, I wanted to highlight the deadline again for the applications, which is March 1st at 5 p.m. And for the first time, the grant application is online, with the goal being to simplify the application process for SFAs, so we will no longer be accepting paper applications. All right, let's take a look at what information is requested in the grant application. So first, we'll start with the grant plan, where you'll indicate if your SFA has received any public or private assistance. So we award additional points if your SFA has the support from the community and if you've gone above and beyond to get your community involved in your breakfast program. So maybe you've received a mini grant from a private business or some financial assistance from a local food bank. We would consider these to be examples of private or public assistance. And this section is worth up to 5 points. And we also want to know if the food service department has the support of the SFA. So this is really important. Is your administration on board, basically? Are they excited about growing the breakfast program? How are they supporting your efforts to implement or expand a breakfast program? So maybe your SFA commits to doing an extensive outreach campaign for the breakfast program, or your SFA trains teachers on breakfast in the classroom. These would be examples of SFA special funding or assistance. So you want to be specific here in the application. How much funding will they provide from the general fund? Explain the details of your plan. And note that the funding should come from the general fund in this case. Funding from the cafeteria fund is not considered special funding. So this portion is also worth up to 5 points. But take note that if your SFA doesn't have any planned public or private assistance, we definitely still encourage you to apply for the grant. Many SFAs leave this section blank and are still awarded a grant. So it's sort of a bonus if you have the support of your community, but it's not necessary to receive a grant. All right, moving on to barriers. Here in the application, you will provide a detailed explanation that describes the existing barriers that hinder the SFA's ability to provide breakfast or decrease the children's ability or desire to participate in the breakfast program. And then you'll go on to explain how your SFA will overcome those barriers and how the grant will assist in doing so. So late buses, students not being hungry first thing in the morning, the cafeteria being too far away from where the students tend to gather, those would be considered barriers to participation. All right, now we're moving on to the site level information of the application. So you'll be asked site level information, and you'll have to answer these questions for each site for which you are applying. You'll be asked to identify any innovative ideas that will help to start up or expand your breakfast program. This is worth up to 30 points, so this is where you want to be very specific and detailed. Some examples of innovative strategies are the ones that Anna talked about earlier, the second chance breakfast, breakfast in the classroom, grab and go. Those are all considered innovative ideas. Next, you'll complete your budgets for each site. So you will have space to request equipment, outreach, and training. When listing your equipment, be specific and reflect the quantities, for each item listed. So we see a lot of sort of standard kitchen equipment requests here, which is fine. So ovens, refrigerators, freezers, those types of things. We also see a lot of requests for mobile carts and wireless POS systems that help to get those breakfasts out to students on the playground or where they tend to gather. So we see a lot of mobile carts. If you have any outreach costs, you'll want to list those items that you plan to purchase. Keep in mind allowable and unallowable costs, which those are all listed in the RFA if you're not sure, but we can't approve clothing, uniforms, prizes, giveaways, or any recurring costs, so keep that in mind. Most of our grantees are approved for banners, posters, flyers, those types of things that promote breakfast. If you have any training costs, you'll want to limit those to expenses that vendors charge. We cannot approve staff salaries as part of training. There are a few more items that might increase your grant score. These are sort of all or nothing points. So if you're implementing a new breakfast program at a site, you'll earn 15 points just for starting up a new breakfast program. If your site qualifies for the severe need breakfast rate of reimbursement, you will earn 15 points. So if your site served 40% or more free and reduced price lunches 2 years prior, you qualify for severe need reimbursement and you will get 15 points. If your site is a program improvement school with at least 50% or more enrolled students approved for free and reduced price meals, you will earn 5 points. If you don't know if your site is a program improvement school, that information is on the CDE's website, or you can just contact me and I'll be able to tell you. And finally, if you agree to operate the breakfast program for no less than 3 years, you earn automatic 5 points. Okay, let's move on to some tips on submitting a successful grant application. But one thing I want to mention is that during the last 2 grant cycles, we were able to award every eligible grant applicant. So if you're worried that you don't have the experience or time to complete a competitive grant application, submit one anyway because you may be awarded. But my first tip is to read all of the instructions before completing the application. We have a lot of useful information in the RFA, so make sure that you take the time to read that. Also, if you are completing the application, try to connect the equipment you are requesting to your barriers and innovative ideas. So you want to make it clear that the equipment is going to help to overcome those barriers or help to support the innovative ideas. For example, if you write a great narrative for the need to implement second chance breakfast on the playground, say during recess, in the innovative ideas section, but then you request an oven to replace an old one in the equipment section, you probably won't score very high. So the equipment should connect with the innovative ideas. So if the equipment doesn't support the innovative ideas, then explain why, or show that it does support the innovative ideas. For example, if an applicant might argue that second chance breakfast will increase participation, so in this case, a new oven to keep up with the new demand is necessary. Also, and this is not required, but try to take the time to get at least one quote, ideally 3, but at least one quote for each piece of equipment you are requesting. If you want to have a realistic idea of how much the equipment is going to cost. If you're awarded a $10,000 grant for an oven that ends up costing $13,000, then we wouldn't be able to cover that extra $3,000. But if you researched it first and asked for the $13,000 oven, then we would be able to cover that cost. A lot of SFAs tend to overestimate equipment costs and then underspend, which leaves them with a lot of leftover money that they don't really know what to do with, and then we have to just return it to the general fund. So either way, you want to get a pretty accurate idea of how much the equipment's going to cost. Another tip is to just be descriptive in the narrative sections. You want to paint a picture for the audience. Let's say you want to implement second chance breakfast on the playground and you need money for a cart. In the section for innovative ideas, explain where exactly you're going to put the cart, how you know that the location is a good location, how you will ensure that meals are counted and claimed correctly, who's going to set up the cart each morning. Include data like the potential percentage increase for participation. So the more detail, the better. And remember that the innovative strategy section is worth 30 points. So if you can get as much detail in there as possible, you'll likely score higher. And finally, we have had several SFAs that have had to return grant funding because after the award was granted, it became clear that the administration at the SFA was not on board with the food service director's plan. So for example, let's say you want to do breakfast in the classroom. Make sure that all the involved parties are on board with your plan and they are aware of your plan so that when you get the grant money, everyone will be eager to get it spent and get that breakfast in the classroom going because sometimes admin doesn't know and then aren't really as excited about the plan, and then the money has to be returned. So try to make sure that your admin is on board with your plan. All right, let's move on to some frequently asked questions. So is there a separate application for the Breakfast After the Bell grant? And the answer is no. We tried to keep the grant application process simple, so we combined the application for the traditional $1 million startup and expansion grants with the new Breakfast After the Bell grant. So you only have to complete one application. Where can I find the application is a common question, and I included, I'm not sure if you can see the link at the bottom of the page. If you click on that, that should take you to our Request for Applications page where you can access the online application. Another common question we get, we have excess net cash resources, can we still apply for a grant? The answer is yes. So per the Breakfast Grant RFA, we may consider SFAs with excess net cash resources to be ineligible to receive a grant, but we evaluate this on a case-by-case basis. So SFAs with excess net cash resources are going to have to include a detailed explanation in the application for the excess net cash resources. So you'll include an explanation, and then we here will decide on a case-by-case basis if we can still grant the award. So if your agency's excess net cash resources are negligible, it's still possible to receive a grant, so we encourage you to apply. And finally, I've included my contact information, my email address, and also the Breakfast Grant email address, which I check daily, my phone number. So feel free to contact me with any questions during the grant process. And also note, I didn't include this on the slide, but also note that we created a Breakfast Grant webpage. If you just search for Breakfast Grant on the CDE's main webpage, you'll be able to find it, and there's more information about the grants there.
Thank you, Tara, so much for that. If that one URL was cut off, we will be sending around the slides after the webinar, so don't worry, you will have that. So, and please don't forget to add your questions into the questions panel so that we can answer those during the question and answer portion of the webinar. So. Thank you again, Tara, and I'm going to turn over the controls here to Zetta.
Okay, great. And I actually somehow just lost my screen. So if you can bear with me for just a moment.
All right. Let me know when you're ready. We can always advance the slides here for you as well, if that's easier. So just let me know.
Okay. Yeah, I'm probably going to have to do that. So while I pull that up, so thank you very much to CFPA for hosting and for the CDE and Tara for also joining and sharing some more information. As I was introduced earlier, my name is Zetta Reicker, and I am a consultant working with, currently with the Oakland Unified School District, implementing their Breakfast After the Bell program. This is, I believe, my fifth round working with the California Department of Ed breakfast grants. I think I've implemented maybe 40 to 50 breakfast schools at this point with this grant. Yeah, so I've seen a lot of different iterations of the program. So today, so just to advance, what I will cover during my time is so the approach, getting the right team together and partners, which I think is critical. Second, program design and what that looks like. So some of the nitty-gritty operations of what it looks like to run a Breakfast After the Bell program. And then what are some project management training, project management tools and some training approaches that I would highly recommend and that are pretty standard practice for what I've used in these programs and implementing these programs. And then we'll talk a little bit about, for those districts that are interested in doing a district-wide implementation, so going to scale or implementing more than one school, what are the greater district-wide impacts that you can expect and that you'll need to plan for and be aware of. And then finally, I'll wrap up with the grant applications and maybe some tips and pointers, and I'll put in a little plug for some other funders and other partners as well. Okay, so advancing to the right team and partners. So breakfast really works best when everyone works together. And by everyone, I mean from a nutrition services standpoint, I highly encourage you to step outside of your department and most definitely include the custodial services department and definitely senior district leadership staff. If you can, ideally, the superintendent, if your superintendent is supportive, that is a key and could be a huge feather in your cap if the superintendent can support. But certainly the business officer or even if you have a curriculum and academic side of the district, getting them involved and having them understand the value of the breakfast program and the why and why you're doing this will be really key champions in helping you move the project forward. So in terms of your team, another critical component is to have a project manager. And this can either be an outside consultant or it can be someone within the district if you can afford to reassign that staff their regular duties and have them kind of temporarily be assigned project management over the breakfast expansion. Because it's really important to have that key person that's managing all of the different aspects and communicating with the team on the program or the project overall. Okay, so moving forward. So moving into program design. How it looks, what Breakfast After the Bell looks like will really vary district by district. I think at this point, there's been so much innovation and expansion in this area that there are really some best practices. And, you know, I really encourage you, if you are just starting, to really make sure that you keep students at the center and think about what is the experience you want the students to have during breakfast time. And again, going back to the partners and looking outside of your department, you're really going to want to think about, you know, what does it look like for a student when they are going to have breakfast, or what is it going to take to have them access breakfast? And sometimes it's going to involve elements from nutrition services to custodial services, even facilities, you know, involving elevators and things like that. So really make sure that you're trying to experience it as a student would, and then think about all the other pieces that you need to access to pull into the project to make it happen. Now with Breakfast After the Bell, it's really an umbrella term that covers a number of different models, which was discussed a little bit earlier. And the main point you want to go away with, though, is that the Breakfast After the Bell is really integrating breakfast with the school day and integrating it into the school. It's moving from what I call a traditional cafeteria breakfast that is, you know, before school, is often not connected with, really integrated with the school. It's in a, you know, can be a socially isolated area on campus in the cafeteria. And really, Breakfast After the Bell is moving and integrating it into the school day, into the physical space, more into the physical space of the school. And so it can be in the classroom, it can be grab and go during a break, it can be second chance, all of, you know, it can really vary by district, but those are some of the key aspects of the program. And again, before you get started, I highly recommend going and visiting another school if you can, and actually observing. There are a wealth of resources that districts have posted online of their own departments and that you can view, and even some really great videos to kind of ease your apprehension and worry about implementing a new program. Okay, so moving forward. So for breakfast in the classroom, really, if you want to break it down into 3 main steps in terms of a daily routine. So breakfast delivery. So how does the breakfast get from the kitchen to the students' hands in the classroom? And there's a number of different ways that can happen. It can be through centrally placed carts in the hallways. It can be hand luggage trucks picked up by students. There are a number of different ways depending upon the geographic layout of your campus. And then mealtime. What does it look like in the classroom? What activities are happening? It is something that is integrated and is part of the instructional minutes and does not take away. And then finally moving into cleanup, which is actually winds up being a pretty critical component to the long-term success of the breakfast in the classroom program, because you really want to make sure that you're not kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul, in the sense that we are now going to be having a lot more students accessing a healthy, nutritious breakfast, but we want to make sure that we're maintaining classrooms, sanitation, health and sanitation standards. A lot of low-income districts have old facilities and have rodent problems, and so making sure that we're not contributing to those problems is a critical factor. And so making sure you have a strong cleanup program and supplies and training materials around that is critical. And then a lot of districts have gone into even sorting of waste, so recycle, compost, and landfill. Pretty expensive programs and operations around that. Okay, so moving forward to how it works to grab and go. Again, you want to think of two main levers that you can pull to implement this program. So one is timing. So again, moving from the 30 minutes before school, moving it into, at high schools, it can be in between a first and second period, a passing period. If you're able to meet with school principals and some of the leadership at the school, they can often rework the class schedule to add a couple minutes in between that first and second period, to extend it a little bit, to be able to have a breakfast period for students to have in a grab and go format. So that's one change in terms of timing. And then think of it for the second lever is location. So getting out of the cafeteria and meeting the students where they are at. And usually this involves a mobile cart, but it can also involve either a serving window or some other type of setup depending upon your campus. And again, just making sure that you're in high traffic areas, and it depends a little bit on your campus on what exactly that looks like. Okay, so moving to the next, so project management and training. So what tools, what are the nitty gritty, getting from A to B? One of the best recommendations I can give is to have your project manager that I mentioned at the beginning in your team to own a checklist, a pre-checklist, a go live, so to speak, checklist, and a post or maintenance mode checklist. And this can include all of the information that needs to be gathered, all of the things that need to be checked, your different marketing activities, the different training dates, everything in one area that can be used by the team to review what needs to happen before a site can move forward with implementation. The second piece that is also critical is a training guide, and I would recommend two. One is for school staff, mainly teachers, and then the second would be for nutrition staff. The first would be the training for teachers. You really want to make sure that it's something that's very visual and not very heavy text, and is really something that can be viewed both online, but later for them to reference when the program starts if they have questions. And then secondly, the training for the nutrition staff also is critical so that they can access it after in their kitchen after the go live support has happened. And if anyone wants to follow up with me after the webinar, I do have a couple examples from previous districts that I have worked with to share with you if you're interested. Okay, so moving forward to slide 8, so going to scale. For those districts that are wanting to implement it more than one school, certainly those that are operating satellite kitchens that are supported through a central office or a central kitchen, you'll want to consider that you're going to have an impact on your delivery vehicles, depending upon how you ship the meals and how they're packaged, can have a huge impact. Oftentimes, these schools are also serving supper, so the loads on the vans are already pretty heavy. So you'll want to make sure that you run some numbers in that area. Storage capacity and labor hours at the central kitchen will also be impacted, as well as increased delivery days for vendors, especially milk, for those that are delivering direct to sites. If you're not able to add a significant amount of equipment, like if your kitchen is too small at a satellite site and you're not able to add the additional refrigeration, one option is you can increase your delivery days by your vendor. But oftentimes it takes time for them to plan and map that out. But it is an option if you don't have space to fit equipment. And then finally, in terms of central office impact, those that have field supervisors or area supervisors, the breakfast, certainly in the classroom model, definitely require more in-depth support and are a little bit more complex to support than just the standard cafeteria breakfast. So it's just something to consider. So going to the next slide, so ideas for grants. So the CDE breakfast grant is really a wonderful, wonderful cornerstone. It's a substantial amount to start up and get a program up and running. And in general, all of your startup costs really should be covered through grants. I think there's enough available now, enough partners that is a realistic assumption. Again, I wanted to just kind of make clear, so I have listed equipment, supplies, marketing, training, the training materials I mentioned, contractors and staff support. Just wanted to flag that the CDE does not provide support for district staff, but it does provide support for training and technical assistant consultants and contractors. They're short-term just for the implementation phase of the project. And then moving forward to slide 10. So a couple other suggestions. So the California Department of Ed grants are really wonderful. As we already mentioned, the Action for Healthy Kids grant is also a really wonderful partner. And then Share Our Strength, No Kid Hungry, has grants. And they also do partnership in terms of events and press events and partnership through staff support and marketing in those areas. So each funder offers a little bit of a different level of support or type of support, I guess I should say. But all really wonderful organizations that really want to help you as the district succeed. And so with that, I think I'll wrap up and hand it back over.
Great. Thank you so much, Zetta. That was wonderful. And thank you again, Tara. So we have about 10 minutes left of our webinar. So we're on to the question and answer portion. So we would really love to hear from all of you on what questions you have for Tara about the grant, about the application process, about whether you're eligible, anything you might have for Tara, or anything you might have for Zetta about her wealth of on-the-ground experience with implementing these programs and working with these grants. So please type your questions into the question box. And we can get started with a, we can get started with a question for Zetta on, the question is, do you have resources or a website that you would recommend for considering equipment and supplies?
I do not. I think the only one that is coming to mind, not really. Other districts, I would say, that have good resources would be maybe LA Unified. San Diego has some good examples. I can certainly share what we've done in Oakland and San Francisco. I don't know if I mentioned, I also worked with San Francisco, so those two districts. But I don't have, in terms of the nitty-gritty operations and supplies list, a website I can think of at the moment.
Okay, well, that's helpful. If you think of anything, we can share that out afterwards with participants, and we can certainly share out any resources that you may have on the checklist or the training guides or the other resources you mentioned earlier with participants. Let's see, the next question we have here, I believe is for Tara, is the grant for, how many sites can each district include in the grant application?
10 sites.
Okay, 10 sites. Other questions? Please do answer, or please do include your questions in that question box. I see we have some more coming in. Let's see. I have a question here. We serve students over 18, but it is classified as a K through 12 school. Are we eligible to apply for these grants?
As long as it's a public school or a charter school or a county office of education.
Okay. And another question about eligibility we have a question about preschools that are a part of the district. Can they be sites?
As long as it's located at a site that has K through 12, or as long as it's on like an elementary school site and it's not a separate preschool.
Okay, wonderful. Another question here, and I believe this would be for Zetta. What type of marketing have you found to be most successful for the breakfast and particularly expanding the breakfast programs?
Most successful has been when you find or partner with someone that typically does that sort of activity within the school, that does parent outreach, and they can either promote it through their parent communication that parents are used to, they're accustomed to seeing, so a newsletter that comes out from the principal, or if they send like folders home on a weekly basis, putting something in the folders home. So using existing school channels is really important, as well as having a kickoff at either a back to school night or a kickoff with the morning of, and making something kind of splashy and stand out to kind of catch parents' attention, but really trying to use the existing networks And then also things like robocalls and robo-texts that are a lot of districts use nowadays are really helpful. And then, of course, always making sure it's translated into the parent's home language.
Thank you so much for that, Zetta. It sounds like you have experience with a lot of different experience with these programs and with getting the word out about these programs. All right, let's see. I think last chance for questions here. We have another 5 minutes. If anyone has another question that they'd like to ask for our panelists today. Okay, well, I think that's it. I want to just say once again a big thank you to Tara and Zetta for being on the line here today. We will be sharing the recorded webinar as well as the slides, and we can provide some of these resources that Zetta mentioned as well. You also have received our contact information today, and the contact information will also be on the slides that we send to you later. So if you have any questions in the future, please do reach out, and thank you so much for your time today. I know everyone is busy and has a lot going on, so thank you for taking the time out of your afternoon to be with us on this webinar today. So, with that, I'll say, a thank you again, and have a wonderful afternoon. Thanks so much.